Marcus Kane had always believed that the most important work happened in silence. While his colleagues at Orbital Research Station Prometheus gathered in the gleaming conference rooms to debate theoretical impossibilities, he preferred the quiet hum of Engineering Bay 7, where broken things came to be reborn. The morning shift change echoed through the corridors as Marcus adjusted his workstation's lighting to that perfect amber glow that helped him think. His fingers moved across holographic displays with the practiced precision of a pianist, each gesture calling up streams of data that would overwhelm most minds. But Marcus wasn't most minds. He was the engineer who had redesigned the station's life support systems to run on 30% less energy, the one who had quietly solved the quantum resonance problem that had been plaguing the deep space sensors for months. Nobody knew his name in the administrative levels. His supervisor, Jenkins, took credit for most of his innovations, and Marcus let him. Recognition meant meetings. Meetings meant politics, and politics meant less time for the work that actually mattered. Today's impossible problem sat before him like a three-dimensional puzzle made of pure mathematics and stubborn physics. The quantum fold drive prototype had been declared a failure by every expert on the station. 3 years of development, billions of credits invested, and the best minds in human space had concluded it was theoretically sound, but practically impossible. The drive was designed to fold spacetime in a way that would allow instantaneous travel across galactic distances, not faster than light travel, but something far more elegant, stepping through space as if the universe were a sheet of paper that could be folded to bring distant points together. The mathematics were beautiful, the engineering was flawless, and every single test had ended in catastrophic failure. Marcus pulled up the latest failure report, his green eyes scanning through data that told the same story as the previous 47 attempts. Power buildup proceeded normally. Quantum field generation achieved stable parameters. Spatial fold initiation began successfully, and then nothing. Not an explosion, not a malfunction, just a complete cessation of all activity, as if the universe itself had decided to ignore the entire process. He leaned back in his chair, running long fingers through dark hair that perpetually looked like he'd forgotten to comb it. Around him, Engineering Bay 7 hummed with the quiet efficiency of automated systems maintaining a space station that housed 12,000 researchers, support staff, and their families. Through the reinforced viewport, the blue marble of Earth hung in the distance, a reminder of how far humanity had come and how far they still had to go. The problem wasn't in the hardware. Marcus had checked every component, every connection, every line of code 3 times over. The problem wasn't in the power systems, which he had personally optimized beyond their original specifications. The problem was something more fundamental, something that everyone else had missed because they were looking at the wrong part of the equation. Marcus called up a holographic representation of the quantum field matrices, letting the complex, three-dimensional structures rotate slowly before his eyes. Most engineers saw these as abstract mathematical constructs, but Marcus had always possessed the rare ability to visualize quantum mechanics as physical reality. To him, the matrices weren't just numbers, they were living, breathing patterns of possibility and probability. He began to notice something that shouldn't have been there. Tiny fluctuations in the field patterns, so subtle that the automated diagnostic systems had classified them as background noise. But Marcus had spent enough time staring at quantum field dynamics to recognize when something was trying to communicate. The fluctuations weren't random, they followed a pattern, like a heartbeat or a musical rhythm. As he enhanced the resolution and filtered out the background interference, the pattern became clearer. It was almost as if the quantum fields were trying to synchronize with something. But what? Marcus spent the next 6 hours in that peculiar state of focused intensity that his few friends had learned to recognize. He didn't eat, didn't answer his communate, didn't acknowledge the concerned glances from passing technicians. He was deep in the puzzle, following threads of possibility through the labyrinth of quantum mechanics and theoretical physics. The breakthrough came at 03 for 7 hours, when most of the station was in its sleep cycle. Marcus had been tracking the field fluctuations across multiple test runs when he noticed They weren't random at all, they were responding to astronomical data. The quantum fields were trying to synchronize with gravitational waves from deep space, specifically from a region of space that conventional sensors showed as empty. Empty space that wasn't empty at all. Marcus's hands moved faster now, pulling up gravitational wave data from the station's deep space monitoring array. There it was, a faint but persistent signal coming from a sector of space roughly 12,000 light-years from Earth. The signal was so subtle that it had been classified as instrumental drift. But when Marcus overlaid it with the quantum field fluctuations from the failed drive tests, the correlation was undeniable. The quantum fold drive wasn't failing because of engineering problems. It was failing because it was trying to connect with something that was already there, something that had been broadcasting a gravitational signature for who knew how long. The drive was working exactly as designed, it just needed to know where it was supposed to fold space to. Marcus sat back in his chair, staring at the data streams with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. He had just discovered that humanity's first attempt at quantum fold technology was not just functional but had been unconsciously designed to respond to an existing gravitational network. Someone or something had built infrastructure in deep space that could support quantum fold travel. They weren't alone. His hands trembled slightly as he began to document his findings. This was beyond anything he had ever encountered, beyond anything anyone on the station was prepared to handle. But as he compiled the data, Marcus realized something else. The signal from deep space wasn't just a navigation beacon. It was getting stronger, and embedded within its gravitational signature was something that looked suspiciously like a mathematical progression. Someone was trying to communicate. Marcus glanced at the chronometer. His shift ended in 3 hours, and he had just uncovered what might be the most significant discovery in human history. In typical Marcus fashion, he saved his findings to a secure partition, backed up the data to 3 separate locations, and began preparing a detailed technical report. He wouldn't present it himself, of course, that wasn't his way. But he knew someone who would understand its significance, someone who spent their nights staring at the stars and dreaming of the impossible. Luna Vasquez, the astrophysicist from Research Division 7, had the kind of mind that could take his engineering breakthrough and transform it into something that might change the course of human civilization. As the artificial dawn began to illuminate the station's corridors, Marcus Kane finished his report, encrypted it with Luna's personal access codes, and sent it through the internal communication system. Then he did what he always did after solving an impossible problem. He turned off his workstation, straightened his workspace, and went home to get some sleep. Behind him, the quantum fold drive sat silent in its testing chamber, no longer a failed experiment, but a key to a door humanity hadn't even known existed. And somewhere in the depths of space, something was still broadcasting its patient signal, waiting for someone to finally understand what it was trying to say. The most important work, Marcus reflected as he walked through the quiet corridors toward his quarters, really did happen in silence. Luna Vasquez had always been a creature of the night shift. While most of the station's 12,000 inhabitants followed the artificial day-night cycle that kept human circadian rhythms stable, Luna found her greatest clarity in the quiet hours when the observation decks were empty and the stars seemed close enough to touch. She discovered Marcus's encrypted message at 0630 hours, just as she was finishing her nightly review of deep space telemetry data. The timestamp showed it had been sent 3 hours earlier, which meant Marcus had been working through the night again. Luna smiled despite herself. She and the enigmatic engineer had developed an odd friendship built on shared insomnia and a mutual appreciation for problems that didn't have obvious solutions. The encryption was elegant, typically Marcus, not the heavy-handed security protocols that the station's administration favored, but a mathematical puzzle based on prime number sequences that only someone with her background in theoretical astrophysics would recognize. It took her 20 minutes to decode, and by the time she finished reading the report, her coffee had gone cold and her hands were shaking. Luna read it twice more, checking the mathematical proofs and cross-referencing the gravitational wave data with her own observations. Marcus had done what he always did: solve the impossible with quiet brilliance. But this time the implications reached far beyond engineering efficiency improvements. The gravitational signature he had identified was real. Luna had been tracking anomalous readings in that sector for the past 8 months, but she had attributed them to instrumental error or perhaps an undiscovered neutron star. The idea that they represented an artificial construct, a beacon of some kind, had never occurred to her. But now, looking at Marcus's correlation analysis between the quantum field fluctuations and the deep space signals, Luna saw patterns that made her breath catch in her throat. The mathematical progression embedded in the gravitational waves wasn't random or natural. It was a sequence, a deliberate communication attempt that had been broadcasting for at least the 2 years she had access to historical data. Luna pushed back from her workstation and walked to the observation deck's main viewport. Research Division 7 occupied one of Prometheus Station's rotating rings, which meant she had an unobstructed view of the galactic plane. Somewhere out there, in a region of space that appeared empty to conventional sensors, something was trying to make contact with humanity. Her mind raced through the possibilities. The signal's origin point was in the direction of the galactic core, but well outside the dangerous radiation zones that made exploration in that direction nearly impossible. If Marcus's calculations were correct, whatever was broadcasting the signal had technology that could manipulate gravitational fields with precision beyond anything in human science. Luna had dedicated her life to the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, but like most scientists in her field, she had expected first contact to come through radio signals or perhaps optical communications. The idea that an alien civilization might communicate through gravitational wave manipulation represented a level of technological sophistication that redefined humanity's place in the cosmic hierarchy. She returned to her workstation and began pulling up every piece of data the station had collected from that sector of space. Optical telescopy showed nothing unusual, just the expected scatter of distant stars and the faint glow of nebulae. Radio astronomy detected only the background hiss of cosmic radiation. But when she overlaid Marcus's gravitational wave analysis with her deep field observations, a different picture began to emerge. The signal wasn't coming from empty space. It was coming from a region where the expected stellar density appeared artificially low, as if something massive was occluding the light from background stars. Something that didn't emit electromagnetic radiation, but had a gravitational signature consistent with a constructed object roughly the size of Earth's moon. Luna felt the familiar thrill that came with discovery, but this time it was tempered by something approaching awe. If her calculations were correct, humanity had just detected evidence of megascale engineering. Someone had built something enormous in the emptiness between stars and had been trying to communicate with anyone capable of detecting gravitational waves. She spent the next 4 hours verifying her findings, running the data through every analytical framework she could access. By the time the station's morning shift began, Luna had compiled enough evidence to support what might be the most significant discovery in human history, but she also understood the implications of what she had found. Contact with an extraterrestrial civilization capable of gravitational wave communication and megascale engineering would fundamentally alter human society. The political, social, and economic ramifications would be staggering. This wasn't the kind of discovery that could be announced through normal academic channels. Luna encrypted her findings and prepared to send them to the one person on the station who might understand the full scope of what they were dealing with. River Chen Nakamura worked in communication systems development, officially designing improved protocols for deep space exploration missions. Unofficially, River was the most brilliant communication theorist Luna had ever encountered, someone who approached the problem of interspecies communication with the creativity of an artist and the precision of a mathematician. If anyone could figure out how to respond to the signal from deep space, it would be River. As Luna prepared her message, she found herself thinking about the entity or entities responsible for the gravitational beacon. What kind of civilization built structures the size of moons and used them to broadcast mathematical sequences across interstellar distances? How long had they been waiting for someone to notice their signals? The gravitational waves had been broadcasting for at least 2 years, possibly much longer. The mathematical progression embedded in the signal appeared to be educational, starting with simple prime numbers and building toward more complex mathematical concepts. It was exactly the kind of message that SETI researchers had theorized an advanced civilization might send to establish communication with less technologically developed species. Someone had been trying to teach humanity to speak their language. Luna finished her report and encrypted it with River's personal access codes. As she prepared to send it, she paused to consider the magnitude of what she was setting in motion. Once River received this information, there would be no going back. Humanity would have to decide how to respond to contact with a civilization that might be thousands or millions of years more advanced. But as Luna looked out at the stars, she realized the decision had already been made. Marcus had solved the engineering problem. She had identified the signal. And now River would have to determine whether humanity was ready for the conversation that was about to begin. She sent the message at 10:47 hours and then did something she rarely allowed herself during working hours. She walked to the observation deck's meditation alcove, sat down on the cushioned bench facing the viewport, and simply stared out at the stars for an hour. Somewhere in that vast darkness, something was waiting, something that had been patient, enough to broadcast the same mathematical lesson for years, hoping that someone would eventually understand. Luna wondered what they would think of humanity when the conversation finally began. She wondered if humanity was ready for the answer. When her comm unit chimed with an incoming message 2 hours later, Luna wasn't surprised to see River's access code. She was, however, surprised by the message's brevity. "Meet me in Lab 7. We need to talk." And Luna, "Bring everything." As Luna gathered her research files and prepared to leave her sanctuary among the stars, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking toward a moment that would divide human history into before and after. The signal from deep space had been waiting patiently for someone to notice it. Now someone had, and everything was about to change. The gravitational beacon continued its steady broadcast, its mathematical messages flowing across the light years, like a patient teacher waiting for its student to finally understand the lesson. In a few hours, that patience would finally be rewarded. Humanity was about to learn that it had never been alone, and the conversation that followed would determine whether the species was ready to join something far greater than itself. River Chen Nakamura lived in the space between logic and intuition, where mathematics became poetry and communication transcended the boundaries of language. Her laboratory in the station's communications division looked more like an artist's studio than a research facility, with holographic displays showing flowing patterns of data that resembled abstract sculptures, more than traditional scientific readouts. When Luna's encrypted message arrived at 10:47 hours, River was deep in her current obsession, developing a universal translation protocol that could theoretically work with any form of structured communication, regardless of its origin. The irony wasn't lost on her that Luna's discovery would put that theory to the ultimate test. River decoded Luna's message with the fluid grace of someone who thought in multiple programming languages simultaneously. As she absorbed the implications of Marcus's engineering breakthrough and Luna's astrophysical analysis, her mind began racing through possibilities that most people would find overwhelming. To River, they were symphonies waiting to be composed. She sent her brief reply to Luna and immediately began preparing Lab 7 for what might be the most important communication challenge in human history. Lab 7 was River's private workspace, a soundproofed chamber where she could work without interruption, and where the station's most sensitive communication experiments took place. By the time Luna arrived with her research files, River had transformed the lab into something that looked like a digital art installation. Holographic displays showed the gravitational wave patterns as flowing, three-dimensional sculptures of light. The mathematical progressions embedded in the signal were represented as musical notation, with harmonic structures that revealed patterns invisible in traditional numerical analysis. "It's beautiful," Luna whispered as she entered the lab. Momentarily forgetting the magnitude of what they were dealing with, River nodded, her dark eyes reflecting the dancing patterns of data. That's the first thing I noticed. Whoever designed this signal understands that communication is an art form, not just information transfer. Look at the harmonic structure of the mathematical progression. She gestured to a display showing the signal's mathematical sequence represented as music. The pattern started with simple, pure tones representing prime numbers, then built into complex harmonies as the mathematics became more sophisticated. But there was something else, an underlying rhythm that seemed almost familiar. They're using aesthetic principles, River explained, her hands moving through the holographic displays to highlight different aspects of the signal. The mathematical concepts are embedded in patterns that are inherently pleasing to perceive. It's not just education, it's seduction. They're making their lesson beautiful so we'll want to learn more. Luna set down her files and moved closer to the display. Can you decode the more complex sections? River smiled, and for a moment she looked like a child who had just been given the perfect puzzle. I've been working on that since I got your message. The later parts of the sequence introduce concepts that don't exist in human mathematics yet. Geometric relationships in more than 11 dimensions. Number theory that assumes a different understanding of infinity. Probability calculations that somehow account for consciousness as a measurable variable. She called up another display, showing her attempted translations of the more advanced sections. But here's the fascinating part, they're not just teaching us their mathematics. They're showing us how their minds work, how they perceive reality. This isn't just first contact. Luna, it's an invitation to evolve. Luna felt a chill that had nothing to do with the lab's temperature. Evolve into what? That's what we need to find out. River turned back to her displays, her fingers dancing through streams of data with practiced precision. But first, we need to figure out how to respond. And for that, I need to understand something fundamental about their communication system. River had spent her career studying the intersection of consciousness and communication. Her doctoral thesis had proposed that all truly effective communication required not just the transfer of information, but the establishment of empathy, a recognition of shared experience between communicating entities. The gravitational wave medium is sophisticated beyond anything we can produce, she continued, but the mathematical content suggests they understand we're working with more primitive technology. They're teaching us their language at a level we can comprehend, which means they've studied us. Studied us how? Luna asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. They've been watching our electromagnetic emissions for decades, maybe centuries. Radio, television, digital communications, everything we've been broadcasting into space. They know how we think, how we communicate, what concepts we understand. This signal isn't just mathematics, Luna. It's a lesson plan specifically designed for human cognition. River called up a new display showing patterns within the gravitational signal that corresponded to mathematical concepts humans had only recently discovered. The correlation was too precise to be coincidental. They waited until we developed the technology to detect gravitational waves before they started broadcasting. They know we're ready for this conversation, even if we don't know it ourselves. Luna moved to one of the lab's chairs, suddenly feeling the weight of what they were discussing. River, what exactly are we getting ourselves into? River paused in her analysis, considering the question with the seriousness it deserved. I think we're being invited to join something. A network of civilizations that communicate through gravitational wave manipulation. The mathematical concepts in the later parts of the signal, they're not just abstract theory. They're practical applications for technologies we can't even imagine yet. She highlighted sections of the signal that showed patterns resembling engineering blueprints, biological diagrams, and what appeared to be star charts of regions beyond human exploration. But here's what really excites me, River continued, her voice taking on the tone she used when she was about to reveal something significant. The signal isn't just educational, it's interactive. Watch what happens when I model a human response. River had been working on response protocols since receiving Luna's message. Using her universal translation framework, she had constructed a mathematical reply that followed the same aesthetic principles as the original signal, prime numbers building into complex harmonies, embedded with information about human mathematics, science, and culture. When she ran the simulation of transmitting her response, something unexpected happened. The original signal pattern shifted, subtle variations appearing in the gravitational wave structure that suggested acknowledgement and adaptation to the human response. It's learning from our hypothetical reply, Luna realized. The signal is designed to evolve based on the responses it receives. Exactly. This isn't a static message. It's a dynamic communication system. Every time we respond, it adapts to better communicate with us. It's like having a conversation with someone who becomes more fluent in your language with every exchange. River saved her current analysis and turned to face Luna directly. But we have a problem. The kind of response they're expecting requires technology we don't have. We can detect their gravitational waves, but we can't generate our own with the precision needed for this kind of communication. Marcus's quantum fold drive, Luna said immediately. If it's designed to manipulate spacetime for travel, could it be modified to generate controlled gravitational waves for communication? River's eyes lit up with the kind of excitement that came from seeing impossible pieces suddenly fit together. That's brilliant. The quantum field manipulation systems would need to be recalibrated, but theoretically, yes. We could turn the fold drive into a gravitational wave transmitter. She began pulling up technical specifications for the quantum drive systems, her mind already racing through the modifications that would be needed. But we'd need someone who understands stellar navigation at a level that goes beyond conventional science. The gravitational wave patterns suggest the source is part of a larger network, possibly involving manipulated stellar positions or artificial gravitational anchors. River paused, considering the full scope of what they were attempting. We need Nova Sinclair. Luna raised an eyebrow. The stellar cartographer? I've heard she maps space routes that shouldn't be possible. Nova doesn't just map space, River replied, already preparing another encrypted message. She understands space in ways that conventional physics can't explain. If we're going to communicate with a civilization that builds moon-sized structures and uses them as gravitational transmitters, we need someone who thinks about space as a living, dynamic system rather than empty vacuum. As River composed her message to Nova, she felt the familiar thrill of a complex puzzle beginning to reveal its solution. Marcus had provided the key, Luna had identified the lock, and now they needed Nova to show them the door. River, Luna said quietly, are we really ready for this? Once we respond to that signal, there's no taking it back. We'll have announced humanity's presence to something that might be millions of years more advanced than us. River looked up from her message composition, her expression serious but determined. Luna, they already know we're here. They've been waiting for us to notice them.